Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a review of Cowboy Bebop Season 1. Now just to be clear, this is a review of the live action Netflix adaptation of the anime series from the late 1990s, which was one of the most popular anime series, which ran for 26 episodes back in 1998. Now there will be spoilers in this review, so just beware going into this video, and you can catch up with all of episodes which are available now on Netflix. Now the Netflix adaptation debuted on November the 19th, 2021 and consists of 10 episodes. It stars in the lead roles John Choi, Mustafa Shakir and Daniel Pineda. Now the story of Cowboy Bebop is that we are set in a very distant future where we follow the adventures of both Jet Black and Spike Seagull, who are cowboys known as bounty hunters, and they go around the galaxy hunting around the most notorious criminals for the ISPP, which is basically a space galactic police force. And they go around collecting monies, just trying to survive and get by. They are shortly joined by Hustler, Faith Valentine, and over the course of the series they encounter multiple villains, assassins and serial killers. We tap into the characters' various backstories. We learn that Spike was a previous member of the highly notorious assassin organisation called the Syndicate, of which he has a personal rivalry against his former partner Vicious, and we also see a love triangle and a tragic romance involving a nightclub singer Julia. We see that Jet is striving to keep in close contact with his young daughter, who he has been separated with his former partner, and as well as dealing with his past life as a cop. And we also learn that Faye has had a previous identity and that she was previously kept in cryostasis, and she struggles over the course of the series to define her ultimate origins. Now there's been so much debate about Cowboy Bebop as a live action adaptation. We have the usual stigma and antagonism with any adaptation of a beloved IP, especially of a popular anime series. Many people felt that this would yet again be another gross mistreatment of a classic anime series following in the footsteps of Dragon Ball Evolution, Death Note and Speed Racer. There was the initial negative feedback around the first footage and screenshots. Many people had issues with the castings. Many felt that they didn't look like the overall characters. We especially drew attention to Daniel Pineda as Faye Valentine. Many fans were disappointed that she didn't share the accurate look of Faye Valentine. If you know the anime, she had that very sexual, iconic look where she has a very tight, silky yellow outfit along with a red cardigan. This backlash was amplified even more when the actress herself took to Instagram, responding to criticism in a very seemingly sarcastic and condescending manner. So in terms of this adaptation, it seems to have a lot going against it, but having now watched all 10 episodes, I have to say that this was a very decent attempt in recreating the anime in live action. Now, I'm somebody who always has respect for honouring the source material, and this series definitely did that. There was very much of a concerted effort to recreate the anime from an aesthetic point of view and in terms of its overall tone. This goes right from the very start, where they clearly have faithfully recreated the iconic intro sequence from the anime using the original music from that intro sequence, which was a very good sign of how well they wanted to stick close to the source material. And like the anime, this too has that very light, brisk spirit about it. It feels very much like a comic or a comedy caper. The actual look of the spaceship designs and the aesthetic of certain locations, I think overall was very good and did again match the very tone and aesthetic of the anime. Now they do take plenty of characters from the anime, expanding of roles of some but then changing the roles and reducing the involvement of others. Now at the same time, I do actually feel that the anime series itself was flawed in terms of its pacing and storytelling, and I think in terms of this adaptation that by sticking so close to the anime, it inherited its strengths but it's also inherited a lot of its weaknesses. Now this involves adopting the same standalone episodic approach in terms of the narrative, and like the anime, many plots really feel inconsequential and less compelling. The show itself does tend to drag at times. It really does have that ponderous feel to it, and a lot of the stories tend to meander a lot when you're watching the episodes, especially if you are watching them back to back. Now the anime episodes themselves were around 20 minutes long, but here in the live action version the episodes are around 50 minutes long, and you really do feel it. If you try to binge watch this entire season, you really are going to struggle. Personally, after 2 to 3 episodes, I had to take a break, try and re-energise my interest, because the episodes really felt stretched out. They really struggled to make each instalment involving all the way through the 50-minute runtime. You had certain story arcs involving Faye's relationship with her mother, or Spike experiencing some sort of virtual reality dream time loop, and these arcs just went far on too long and they really slowed down any potential for pace or momentum throughout the series. Also, the look of the show itself, whilst very impressive, but I also felt that it looked too clean. You know, when we go back to the anime, whilst it was very much of a futuristic setting, it still had that gritty and very grimy landscape and feel towards it, which gave it that realistic edge. But I think looking at this series overall, everything just looks a bit too pristine, a bit too clean, and this is a result really of when you're shooting a lot of these scenes in front of a green screen. Sometimes it takes you out of it. There are certain scenes, particularly on outer space, when we're looking at planets or in asteroid fields in many ways, and it just has more of that plastic feel about it. Now, as I mentioned, they do reflect that breezy feel and spirit of the anime, but I also felt that they almost had too much fun here. Like they got too carried away in terms of the overall tone itself. Now, the anime actually had some very more somber and far more darker installments, which were the most interesting episodes of the entire series. But here we very much stick to that more comic strip, poppy, wacky tone. It almost felt closer in spirit to the Adam West Batman 1966 series. It's almost too playful, it's too flippant, it's almost like it's too self-aware of what it's trying to be too clever, it's trying to be too self-knowing. And as a result, this undercuts any potential suspense or tension. What should be a gripping fight sequence or a gripping shootout sequence is really diluted by the overall use of the jazzy and pop soundtrack, the quick clips and the quick one-liners, and I just think the tone is too offbeat and it takes away any seriousness out of the situation. I also look at the fight choreography. Now, you can clearly see that the actors are doing a lot of their stunts, which is also good, but I think as a result of this, the fight scenes feel too stiff. The punches and kicks are so telegraphed, it really takes you out of the action itself. Now, despite all of that, the saving grace of this series, without question, are the lead actors and their performances. As mentioned before, so much was talked about all of the castings, but I have to say they really conveyed the characters really well throughout the show. There really is such a strong chemistry, energy and dynamic between all of the lead actors, and it feels really organic. It doesn't really feel forced or too much overplayed, despite the playful tone of the series itself. Yes, we get a lot of the typical bickering, dysfunctional family dynamic, as what we saw with the anime, but also there is a sense of togetherness, a sense of teamwork and unity. You really do believe that these characters care about each other, and we have multiple sequences when they go all out to make sure that everybody is okay, and I think overall that lends a lot of credibility to the characters themselves. John Choi is really good as Spike. Yes, I do think, as a lot of fans, that he is too old for the character. If you go back to the anime, Spike is very much more of a fresher, younger, dynamic character. But once you get past that, I think John Choi overall channels the same selfish, nonchalant, carefree personality of the character. Mustafa Shakir is excellent as Jet Black, despite the race change, and he is very much the morally conscious character out of the three. He's far less confident and mobile than Spike, but he's far more likeable and rootable as a character, and he very much has that grounded and reliable presence. There is some sympathy to be had when we throw in the fact that he has a young daughter and he's trying to reconnect with her. We then talk about Daniel Pineda, who overall I think is excellent as Faye Valentine. Yes, I know people will be against her already because of the reactions to the criticism as what I mentioned before, but if you actually put all of that to one side and you watch this series overall, she very much has that same snarky feistiness and sarcastic personality as what we would associate with Faye Valentine. She has that same selfishness and cynicism as what we associate with Faye. Now, in terms of differences, I do believe this version, they made Faye a bit more compassionate, a bit more caring than what I believe we saw within the anime. She's clearly not quite as sexualized as the anime version. I didn't really mind that too much. I don't believe that was a detriment to this portrayal, but again, original fans may take certain issues with that. Now, they did later on introduce a lesbian romance. It was much more of a casual relationship. Again, I had no particular issue with this. It will trigger a lot of people online who again focus far more on the identity politics and the overrepresentation of LGBTQ. That will trigger a lot of people on social media when reviewing the show. But I don't think that's an issue really. It's really played as a one-off and they don't refer it to again after this particular episode. We then talk about the supporting roles with both Vicious and Julia, and as I mentioned before, they have far more prominent and expanded involvement in this series as opposed to the anime, and overall I think this was a good move considering the length of the episodes. I don't think there was enough story there to have it primarily be carried by the main three lead characters. I think you needed some help in terms of supporting roles, and in terms of that choice I think it was a good decision. Now, I did like the role of Julia, which was played very well by Elena Satine, she's very beautiful, very strikingly attractive, as what we would associate with Julia. And there is much more of a sympathetic approach to this character, as basically we see her trapped in her overall relationship with Vicious and the association with the Syndicate, and she makes multiple attempts to try and break away from both of those associations. They do centre a lot around her love story with Spike, particularly in the last couple of episodes. They spend a lot more time on this narrative than I believe the anime did, and I think, again, this was a good decision. It did add more depth and sensitivity to the character. The only real issue I've had was the particular twist at the finale, where we see essentially that Julia wants to become the primary leader of the Syndicate, and that she rejects Spike and shoots him at the end of the episode. Now, I didn't like this because I felt it was out of keeping in terms of the overall character that you've established throughout this particular series. For the most part, as I mentioned before, Julia just wants to get away from the Syndicate and Vicious. So to all of a sudden have a about turn and have her want to become the main leader of the Syndicate made really no sense. Now, a far less convincing portrayal was the role as Vicious, the clear antagonist of the show. Like Julia, we get more involvement in terms of the backstory. In the anime, he was much more of a mysterious figure, but here we centre far more on the character. And this episode itself, we focus on the relationship between both Spike and Vicious in their earlier roles within the Syndicate, and we see over the course of the story how Vicious becomes involved with Julia, the eventual breakup between the two, and the development with the relationship with Spike. So this was a good amount of focus, but I just think in terms of the character, they tried to make him much more of this menacing, psychotic personality, and it just didn't land all the time. It didn't really convince you. It came across as a bit too overplayed, slightly a bit hokey, and you weren't overall convinced in the overall imposing nature of the character. Now, in terms of the episodes itself, I believe the strongest episodes was, episode 7, when we do adapt the Clown Killer storyline. And I also liked the last 2 episodes where we get a far more climatic edge in terms of the overall conflict between Spike and Vicious. And this is really the only time throughout the particular season that we do generate any sense of peril and danger and suspense. So I did enjoy the last couple of episodes. Now, at the end of the finale, we do get a kind of end credit stinger where we see the emergence of Ed, who is another character involved within the anime. He's basically a very high-tech hacker, and he comes across a wounded Spike at the final scenes. Now, to be honest, in terms of the anime, I wasn't really a fan of the character. He wasn't really that significant overall. He didn't really have a lot of presence. I primarily saw him more as comic relief at best. And I didn't like the rendition that they showed here. He's this very wacky, very extroverted character. It just came off all wrong. Now, if we indeed get a season 2, and I believe the showrunners have left that option open, I do hope they make this far more of a fleshed out and developed character than what we saw in the original anime. So if I had to give a score for Cowboy Bebop, the Netflix adaptation, I would give it a 6.1 out of 10. They go to great lengths to respect the source material, be faithful to the anime itself. There's a real concerted effort here, which I will always respect. You have great performances and great chemistry from all of the 3 lead characters involved, but there were certain issues with the pacing and tone and storytelling, and I do think 15 minutes was far too long for each episode. And I think just overall the tone was too playful, it was too comical, and it was hard for you to really stay throughout the show and take it very seriously overall. But in terms of live action adaptations, as I mentioned before, I do believe this was a fine and decent effort. So there's my thoughts and feelings and review of Cowboy Bebop Season 1, the Netflix live action adaptation. Let me know what you think in the comments below. How do you think this compares to previous live action adaptations? What do you think about the overall debate as to whether anime can be successfully converted in live action? If I've got time, I may do an additional video where I talk about that debate overall. If you'd like to see me cover that discussion, then also let me know within the comments as well. Please also hit that and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.